I never thought betrayal would come from the people who raised me, or the brother I once worshipped. Growing up, I believed love was unconditional, that family meant safety. But when my life hit a rough patch, the people I trusted most handed me the bill. And told me I deserved it. This is the story of how I went from being the invisible daughter to the designated scapegoat of a wealthy, tight-lipped family. When my rich brother scoffed and said I should pay for something he did, claiming I owed them anyway, I expected my parents to defend me. Instead, they nodded in agreement, like everything he'd said was gospel. What followed was a slow, agonizing unraveling of family secrets, decades of quiet resentment, and a revelation that shattered everything I thought I knew about my childhood. As I uncovered what really lay beneath their polished facade, I realized this wasn't just about money, it was about control, shame, and something much darker that had been buried for years. This 5-part series dives deep into betrayal, emotional survival, and the quiet strength it takes to walk away from the people you were taught to never abandon. Was just trying to help. That's what still stings the most. I wasn't asking for anything extravagant, just a little support during a hard time. A pause in the judgment, a moment of understanding. But instead, my brother laughed. And not just laughed, he made a show of it. Leaning back in his designer chair, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Let her pay," he said, "she owes us anyway." I wish I could say my parents defended me, told him he was out of line. But they didn't. They just nodded. My mother even sighed like she was tired of me. Like I'd been a burden all along. I had lost my job 2 months before that dinner. It was a quiet layoff, part of a restructuring, nothing to be ashamed of. But to my family, failure wasn't something we talked about. My brother, Daniel, had just closed on a second home in the mountains. My father had retired early. My mother had taken up oil painting, something she never had time for when we were growing up. And me? I was scraping together freelance gigs. Keeping the lights on, barely. I didn't want their money. I wanted to borrow the family cabin for a few weeks, just to breathe, to reset. I thought it was reasonable. They never used it. But the moment I brought it up, I felt the energy shift. My brother raised an eyebrow, like I was asking to borrow his car and crash it on purpose. "That cabin is worth more than your entire yearly income," he said, half laughing, half daring me to argue. "I'm not asking for the deed," I said. "Just a few weeks. I need a place to think. To get back on my feet." And then he said it. That sentence I'll never forget. "Let her pay. She owes us anyway." The way he said it, like I was some tenant behind on rent. My father nodded. Slowly, eyes never meeting mine. My mother sipped her wine. I tried to laugh it off, pretend it didn't hurt. "Oh, you? For what?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay light. Daniel didn't answer. He just looked at my parents, waiting. And then my father finally said, "You know what we've done for you. Don't play dumb." It was like being slapped with invisible hands. I opened my mouth, then closed it. Because in that moment, I realized I had no idea what they meant. What had they done for me, other than raise me like they did him? "You don't mean college," I said quietly. We both went. "No," my mother said. "We mean everything." Everything, I excused myself. From the table. I couldn't breathe. I stood in the hallway staring at family photos, Daniel in his cap and gown, me in the background, blurry, always smaller somehow. That night, I went back to my small apartment and lay awake until sunrise. What did I owe them? Had I missed something? Some unspoken deal I never agreed to? Was love something I had to pay back, with interest? The next day, I went looking for answers. I started with a locked drawer in my father's old office, the one he never let anyone open. I wasn't sure what I was hoping to find. But what I found changed everything. Inside, there was a manila folder with my name on it. Just my name. Written in bold, black ink. The papers inside weren't what I expected. Not financial documents. Not childhood drawings, they were medical records, records from when I was a baby. Names I didn't recognize. A hospital I'd never heard of, and at the bottom of the last page, there was a note in my mother's handwriting. One sentence, she can never know. I stared at those words until they blurred. My hands were shaking. My mouth went dry. What couldn't I know? What was in these records that made them lie to me for decades, and why, when I asked for help, did it feel like I was paying for something I didn't even choose? I put the papers back and closed the drawer. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't just the broke daughter anymore. I was the girl with a secret buried under years of polite silence. I needed to know the truth, and I was going to find it, even if it destroyed everything. I couldn't stop thinking about those words, she can never know. I read them over and over, as if the ink might shift, change its meaning. But it didn't. It stayed the same, final and terrifying. My mother's handwriting, delicate and decisive, sitting at the bottom of medical records that had no business being hidden in a locked drawer. I barely slept that night. My mind kept replaying every strange moment from my childhood, every time my parents looked at me with something that wasn't quite love. Every time I felt like a guest in my own home. Daniel never got that look. He was the favorite, the golden boy. I was just tolerated. Useful when needed. Forgotten when not. The next morning, I called the hospital listed on the documents. St. Catherine's Medical Center. I told them I was requesting information on a patient, myself, from years ago. The woman on the phone paused for a long time after I gave my name. Then she said something that nearly made me drop the phone. You're not listed as the biological child, she said carefully. Is this a legal inquiry? I hung up. Not listed as the biological child. What did that even mean? Adoption? A swap? A mistake? My heart was racing, palms slick with sweat. I felt like I was outside of my own body. Later that day, I drove to my parents' house. I didn't call. I didn't knock. I used my old key, stepped into the kitchen, and waited. My mother came in first, still in her gardening gloves. She froze when she saw me, eyes flicking down to the folder in my hands. You went through his drawer, she said. You lied to me, I replied. About everything. She didn't deny it. She didn't ask what I found. She just sank into the nearest chair and pulled off her gloves one finger at a time, like she needed a distraction. I deserve to know, I said. What am I not supposed to know? There was a long silence, and then, finally, she looked up. You were never supposed to find out. We did what we thought was best. For who? I asked. For you? For Daniel? No, she said. For her. Her. It was the first time I realized the secret might not be about me. At least, not only me. She told me everything, or so she claimed. That there had been another baby, a girl born 2 years before me. A girl who didn't survive. That my birth came with complications, and a nurse, a close friend of my mother's, had arranged something. A quiet exchange. I was brought into the family, no questions asked. No legal adoption. Just placed. You were sick, she said. The doctors didn't think you'd make it. But we kept you. We gave you everything. And you survived. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My chest ached with something too big to name. You gave me everything? I said. Then why do I feel like I've been paying it back ever since? My father walked in midway through that conversation. He heard enough to know the damage had been done. We protected you, he said simply. We made sacrifices. And now I owe you? I asked. That's what this is about? That's why Daniel gets everything and I'm told to pay? He didn't answer. But his silence said more than words ever could. IT was never about money. It was about control. Ownership. They didn't raise me, they kept me. And every time I asked for help, it reminded them of the deal they never made but always believed in, that I was lucky to be there. That I owed them my life. I left the house that day feeling more orphaned than I ever had before. The truth wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. Because all those years I tried to be good, to be enough. I was just fulfilling a role I never chose, but I wasn't done. Not yet. There was one person who hadn't spoken. One person who seemed to know more than he let on. Daniel. My parents raised me out of obligation. Daniel watched it happen. He saw every cold shoulder, every dismissive comment. And he never said a word, but maybe he knew more than he let on. Maybe he'd been carrying a secret of his own. So I sent him a text, "Need to talk. And this time, I want the truth." He didn't reply for hours. But when he did, it was short and chilling. "I figured you'd find out eventually." That's when I knew. He had been waiting for this moment, and he wasn't going to make it easy. When Daniel finally agreed to meet, he didn't choose a public place or even our parents' house. He told me to come to his office, on the top floor of the building. With his name on it. Everything about it screamed power, control, legacy. It was exactly the kind of place where someone like him would feel untouchable. I stepped into his office and found him already seated, sipping espresso from a tiny cup like he was doing me a favor just by being there. The windows stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a view of the city he helped build, or at least bought his way into. He didn't even look up when I walked in. "I take it you've spoken to them," he said. I sat down across from him, keeping the folder in my lap. The same one I had taken from Dad's drawer. "I want your version." He finally looked at me. His expression was unreadable, part pity, part contempt, and something else I couldn't place. "Something like guilt, but sharper." "There's no version," he said. "Just facts. You weren't supposed to be here. But you were. Did you know?" I asked. "All along?" He nodded, almost bored. "They told me when I was 15. I was old enough to understand that things weren't normal. The way they treated you. The way they talked about you when you weren't around." I stared at him, waiting for something human. Regret. Compassion. Anything, but he leaned back in his chair and continued. "I was angry at first. I thought it was cruel. But then I realized they never saw you as theirs." "Not really. You were this arrangement. Something they were stuck with after losing the first one. And when you didn't die like they expected, they didn't know what to do with you." My throat tightened. "So they punished me for surviving?" "No," he said. "They just never loved you. And eventually, they stopped pretending." It was said so plainly, so matter-of-factly, like he was reading the weather. But every word felt like a blade. "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked. "All these years, you could have told me." He tilted his head. "And what would that have changed? You would have run off? Asked them for answers? You were already desperate for their approval. I figured the truth would just crush you." I stood up. "And what about now? You think I'm strong enough now?" He didn't answer. Just smiled faintly. "Now? Now I think you're angry. And I think that's finally useful." I blinked. "Useful?" He walked over to a cabinet and pulled out a thick envelope. Tossed it on the table. "This is everything they never told you. Birth certificate. Medical files. Letters. Some from your real mother. She tried to find you, you know. But she was young. Poor. No lawyers. No power." My hands were trembling as I picked up the envelope. "You kept this all these years?" "I did," he said. Because I knew this day would come. And when it did, I wanted to be the one who controlled how you found out. I looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time. The way he watched me, calculated every word, every reaction, it wasn't about family. It was about leverage. Dominance. You're not giving me this out of kindness, I said. No, he admitted. I'm giving it to you because the game's changing. And you're part of it whether you like it or not. What game? I asked. He walked back to his desk, dismissing me like a meeting that had gone over time. The one where you decide who you really are. Them? Or her? I left his office with the envelope tucked under my arm and a storm brewing in my chest. At home, I laid everything out on the table. The documents. The letters. The names. And then, finally, I found it. A return address. It was old. Faded. But it was there, the woman who wrote those letters. She was alive when she wrote them. Maybe she still was, and if she was, I was going to find her because someone out there loved me enough to fight for me, and maybe that was the real beginning. The return address on the envelope was faded, but still legible. It was somewhere rural, far from the polished streets I'd grown up on. A small town I'd never heard of, in a state I never had any connection to, until now. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Not Daniel. Not my parents. I didn't even tell my friends. I needed this to be mine. No opinions. No interruptions. Just me, chasing a truth I hadn't asked for but could no longer ignore. The drive was long, quiet, and tense. The farther I got from the city, the more I felt like I was peeling off layers of myself, the dutiful daughter, the overlooked sister, the outsider in her own life. By the time I reached the town, I wasn't sure who I was anymore. But I knew what I was looking for. Her name was Margaret. That was all the letter said. Just Margaret. No last name, no family. But the letters were signed with love. They were desperate, raw. She had written about losing me, about the nights she spent wondering if I was warm, if I was safe, if I knew I was wanted. She had tried to find me, but the system was closed, the trail too well hidden, and yet, she kept writing. Letter after letter. All sent to the same address, my parents' house. They never replied. They never told me. I found her on the edge of town, in a small house surrounded by sunflowers. It looked like something out of a different life, one I could almost imagine myself growing up in. It wasn't fancy. But it was full of care. When she opened the door, I recognized her eyes immediately. My eyes, she looked older than I expected. But not fragile. Her hair was gray at the temples, her hands worn, but when she saw me, she didn't hesitate. She said my name, not the one my parents gave me, but the one from the hospital records. The one she had given me, Claire, she whispered. Is it really you? I didn't know how to answer. I was still holding the envelope, like it was a shield between us. But something in her voice, soft, trembling, reverent, made me nod. She pulled me into her arms before I could say another word. And I let her. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was being held by someone who didn't expect anything in return. We talked for hours. She made tea, sat across from me at her kitchen table, and told me the story I'd been waiting my whole life to hear. She had been 17 when she had me. No family support, no stability. The hospital told her I was sick. That I needed treatments she couldn't afford. That there was a couple, wealthy, grieving, desperate for a baby, who could take care of me. She was told it was adoption. But there were no papers. No lawyers. No goodbye. She sent letters for years. She said she never stopped believing that one day I'd come to find her, and now I had asked her why she never went to court, never fought harder. She looked down, ashamed. Because they told me if I caused trouble, you'd suffer for it. And I didn't want to make your life harder. That was the part that broke me, because while she stayed quiet to protect me, my adoptive family used that silence to punish me. to make me feel like I owed them for saving me, when the truth was, I was stolen. Disguised as a favor, I showed her the medical files, the letters I found, the note from my mother. She can never know. She read them with tears in her eyes but no surprise. They lied to all of us, she said. But you found the truth. And that's yours now. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't beg me to call her mom. She just said she was glad I came. That if I wanted to come back, there would always be a room for me. I left before sunset. But I didn't feel alone anymore. Driving back, I realized I had a choice. I could go back to pretending. Or I could make them all face what they had done. No more silence. No more polite dinners. No more guilt. I was going to tell my story. All of it, starting with Daniel, because while Margaret may have stayed quiet out of love, I was done being silent out of fear. Next stop, the brother who thought he still held all the cards. I didn't go straight to Daniel's office this time. I made him come to me. I told him to meet me at the cabin, yes, the same family cabin I had once asked to borrow when I was at my lowest. The one he mocked me over. The one my parents acted like was too valuable for me to step foot in. Now I held the keys. Margaret had quietly transferred me something I never expected, an old piece of land, inherited from her mother, long forgotten. It wasn't much, but it was enough collateral to pressure my parents into a deal. One I orchestrated through a lawyer they didn't know I had. It took only a few days of silence from me, no calls, no explanations, and they panicked. My father called 6 times. My mother even showed up at my apartment. But I didn't answer the door. Daniel came to the cabin. When he arrived, he looked irritated but curious. You dragged me out here for what? Some emotional epilogue? I handed him a folder. A different one this time. Inside were copies of everything. The letters from Margaret. The falsified documents. My real birth certificate. And a letter addressed to the press, signed by me. He read it slowly. His jaw tightened. You wouldn't. I already have, I said. I sent it out this morning. To 3 journalists and 1 podcast host who loves stories about wealthy families with dirty secrets. It goes live in 48 hours unless I say otherwise. He looked up at me, calculating. So what do you want? That was the moment. I knew I'd won. Because for the first time in our lives, Daniel wasn't in control. He wasn't mocking or deflecting. He was negotiating. I want you to admit it, I said. Out loud. That you knew. That you stood by and let them treat me like a burden. That you helped them rewrite my life. He sat down, suddenly quiet. The weight of it all settling on his shoulders. You think I didn't feel it too? He asked. The pressure to be perfect? The way they used me to distract from their mistakes? I raised an eyebrow. You got praise. I got silence. He nodded. Slowly. You're right. I let it happen. I thought ignoring it was better than dealing with the truth. I didn't respond. Because I wasn't there for apologies. I was there for accountability. I'm not asking you to fix it, I said. I'm telling you, it's over. The silence. The guilt. The control. I'm done carrying it. He handed the folder back to me. What now? Now I go public, I said. Not to ruin you. Not even to ruin them. But to reclaim what you all tried to erase. He didn't argue. He didn't threaten. He just sat there, staring at the floor, like a man who had finally been unmasked, who walked out of that cabin with the kind of peace I never knew I could feel. Not revenge. Not victory, closure. A few weeks later, the story went live. It didn't explode right away, but it spread, quietly, steadily. People shared it. Commented. Sent messages. Some were horrified. Others said they'd lived through something similar. The story wasn't just mine anymore. My parents went silent. My mother stopped painting. My father stayed off the golf course. Daniel kept his distance. But I didn't. I stayed loud. I started writing. Not just about them. About survival. About identity. About what it means to rebuild a life from fragments you weren't supposed to find, and Margaret, she became part of that life. Slowly, carefully. Not to replace anyone, but to be exactly what she always wanted to be, someone who loved me without conditions. So when people ask me what I would do differently, I tell them nothing. Because every unanswered question, every cold glance, every moment of doubt, it all led me here. The truth. Myself. The voice they tried to bury, and now that I've found it, I'm never giving it back.